Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's start our Sunday morning Gita class with some mantras. And the reason we sing some mantras before any scriptural reading or studies, so that our scattered mind can be into concentration. O Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Grathitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamrit Varshine Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshime Namo Astute Vyas Vishal Bhute Pul Arvind Ayat Patra Netar Yentavya Bharatel Purnaha Prajvalito Gyan Mea Pradeepaha पर पान पारी जाता है तोत्र वेत्र एक पान है ज्ञान मुद्राए कृष्णाए गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत् वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूर मर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगत गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्रावती कृपेन वहने कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सो तीर्णा खलु पांडवै रन नदी के वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थ गंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपदय रह पेप्यमानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपातमहं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुताः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्ये स्तवे वेदै सांगपद क्रमोपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थि तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुषुर असुर गणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. These days we are trying to understand Lord Krishna's message in this chapter 14, GuNatraya Vibhaga Yog. So the qualities of this Maya, this Prakriti. And he has been telling us the symptoms we can see in our own personality when we are in a certain, predominantly in a certain guna. And he says, those influenced by sattva, that is a sattvic quality, are equipped with a measure of purity, virtue, knowledge, selflessness. So their actions are also performed with relatively pure intentions and results are uplifting and satisfying. So sattvikta is one of the guns, and that is the purity and the topmost. Sure, it's a gun of the Maya, he has been telling us. Those influenced by Rajsikta are agitated by the desires of their senses and mind. The intentions behind their actions is primarily sense gratification for themselves and even their dependents, Rajsikta. And those who are predominated by Tamsik, Guna, have no respect for scriptural injunctions and codes of conduct. They end up committing sinful deeds. They really relish perverse pleasures, which further immerse them in delusion. So this is basically what we have been learning in this chapter. Okay. And then he also told us in the last verse number 16, where we ended the class, the fruits of sattvikta that means good actions. So that's like a happiness. You feel pleased, you feel good about it. The fruit of rajas is pain eventually, and the fruit of tamas is ignorance. So now let's look at verse number 17. Satvat sanjayate jnanam rajasah lobham evacha Pramad moho tamsaha bhavataha ajnanam evacha. Satvat, from purity. Sanjayate, arises. Jnanam, knowledge. Rajasaha, from rajsikta, from activity. Lobh, greed. Ev means even, cha means and. Pramad moho, pramad is carelessness and moh is delusion. Tamsaha, from tamsikta, from inertia. Bhavataha, arise. Ajnanam, ignorance. Ev means even, cha means and. So knowledge arises from sattva. Okay. Greed from rajas. Carelessness, delusion, and ignorance arise from tamas. Okay. So the functions of the guns, while they appear on the stage of the mind, intellect, are explained here. Often we think that these guns are only in the food. No. Anything in this material world has these three guns. And our mind and intellect are also part of the material world. Our behavior, our attitude, our aptitude, all of that is part of the Maya. So from sattva arises wisdom. Because in the pure homogeneous self, there is nothing other than itself for it to understand. It's like a oneness we feel, the purity we feel. We feel undivided, even though outside we look like divisible. And that's how we move towards the wisdom, the truth. Because naturally, when the mind is pure and serene, when there is the least agitation in it, the light emerging through it is steady and properly focused. Because the agitations of the mind are the one which really throw us off. So the result of the predominant sattva in our mind is ultimately the rediscovery of the self. So ever since we were little, we were told to just keep your environment sattvic, keep your language sattvic, keep your food sattvic, keep your relationships sattvic. Okay? And greed from rajas, when the mind is seething with a constant eruption of desires, of course it will be in a state of agitation. So it's like a very natural to be anxious because we are trying to pacify ourselves constantly. And the minute one desire is fulfilled, another one erupts. So endless demands, and ultimately it expresses into greed. It's never enough. Never enough. And tamas really veils our intellect. It just covers it, covers that light of our soul. So the capacity to discriminate between the right and the wrong. Tamasic mind doesn't understand. Ability to reject the wrong and accept the right, those are like a privileges given to a human mind. And if we don't use them, we are really moving towards the tamsikta. So tamas veils the capacity to perceive rightly the world outside and also destroys the power of right judgment. What to do, what not to do, where to go, where not to go, or even what to eat, what not to eat. So a person who is under deluding effects of tamsikta miscalculates the world, expects from it the experiences which are impossible. And delusion really takes the person towards the further darkness. And now we know this philosophy which we are studying. Life is not just linear, and life is not just a few decades. We were before and we will be after. The garb which we are wearing, it is part of this Maya. It will get destroyed. Got to move. So where will we go? It depends upon which state we leave our body. Udharvam gachanti satvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasa, Jaganye gun vritista adho gachanti tamasa. Udharvam, upward, better place. We know that Earth is not the only place. It's just like a speck of in this whole big universe. There are a lot of other realms. So udharvam, upwards, that means better. Gachanti, go. Satavastha, seated in the satvikta. And what is seated in satvikta? Our antakara, our subtle body. Because what really forces our soul to go somewhere is our subtle body, predominantly mind. Madhye, in the middle, Tishtanti, dwell, Rajasa, the Rajasic. Jaganye gun vritistha, abiding in the function of the lowest gun. Jaganya means lowest. Adho, downwards. Gachanti, go, tamsa, the tamsic. Those who are abiding in sattva go upwards. The Rajasic dwell in the middle. And the tamsic, abiding in the function of the lowest gun, go downward. So basically, he's mentioning the ladder of evolution, which can be conceived in these three stages. The lowest state of development is seen in the vegetable and animal kingdom, because the discrimination power is not that prominent in them. So he says we can go downward also if we predominantly stay tamasic. And the middle stage of the evolution is seen in a human form. That's why majority of the people, human beings, are Rajasic actually. Lot of desires, lot of agitation, lot of stress. That's all part of Rajasic. And the higher state of existence is seen in the disembodied heavenly abode. We call them devatas also. Or we can call them the gurus who come over here out of compassion for people like us. They are higher state. So here evolution means a greater awareness of experience, a lesser amount of agitation, and a sharper power of intelligence. So this is the yardstick Lord Krishna is using over here to measure the evolution. So the quantity of joy or happiness, peace or bliss experienced in that higher states. So in other words, the reincarnation of the souls in their next birth is linked to the gunas that predominate their personality. Okay. And this can be compared to a student applying for college admission. After completing high school. So those students with good qualifications, they get admission in the better colleges. Okay. So the same thing goes. This is an earth school. A lot of people say that. And we can change. We have the power to change our mind, our intellect, and even our goal. So sattva abiding, go upwards. So pure life of discrimination, clear thinking, right judgment, self-discipline. Cultivate this more and more. And when the mind is kept in this kind of a calmness, dynamically you will see that movement is upward. And it's not only after we die. So right now, right here, if we make these changes, we see more and more bliss and happiness with this kind of a life, sattvic life. And Rajasic dwell in the middle with their desires, agitations, ambitions, achievements. It's just like can't even sleep at night. So Lord Krishna is not saying that we should not work hard to do our duties, but mind should be calmed. Outwardly work hard, but inwardly stay calm. Because that's what he keeps telling Arjuna. Wage this war Put your mind and intellect into me. This is what we need to learn how to do it. So he's not saying that sit down and do nothing, because when we sit down and do nothing, that is tamsikta. We got to work hard. We got to do our duties, whatever we are supposed to do. But in which state of mind we are doing it, this is what he's teaching us. And tamsik go downward, those who revel in the misconceptions, carelessness of the higher call in themselves, because they are deluded by lust, passion. Almost like they live in a state of drowsiness, inertness. They definitely go into the lower stages. And again, remember the higher state, it could be on this earth, or it could be the celestial abode. Okay, celestial abode. There is another great scripture which is called Bhagavad Puran. See, this is a Bhagavad Gita we are studying. There's a Bhagavad Puran. Okay. There are 18 Purans, I'm sure you're familiar with. See, Bhagavad Gita is part of the epic Mahabharata. But Bhagavad Puran is by itself a great scripture, Puran. And over there, the Rishi says, Satve pralina swaryanti narlokam rajoleya tamoleya tu niryamayanti mam ev nirguna. Those who are in Sattvagun reach the higher abodes. Those who are in Rajagun return to the earth planet. And those who are in Tamogun go to the lower worlds. So there are higher worlds, there are lower worlds. Okay. So it's almost like a 14 lokas they talk about in this part of the universe. So 7 below and 6 above, and in the middle we have Earth. So when a person free to enjoy the Godhood as a being totally released from all his contacts with the pluralistic world, from all his subtle attachment to it, what happens to that person? That is like a path of liberation, moksha, which can be gained through right judgment of the world outside. And Lord Krishna says, Na anyam gunebhya kartaram yada drashta anupashyati gunebhya charam paramaveti madbhavam sa adhigachati. This is verse number 19. So in this one, Lord Krishna is showing us the simple solution to break out the bondage of the karmas, or the bondage of these gunas also. So no anyam, not others, gunebhya, then the guns, kartaram, agent, yada means when, drashta, the seer, drashta. Okay. Anupashyati, beholds. Another word for drashta is the soul. One who is witnessing, one who is seeing. That's why it's called seer. Gunebhya, then the qualities. Cha means and, from higher, veti knows. Mad bhavam, my being. Sa means he, adhigachati, attains to. When the seer beholds no agent other than the guns and knows him who is higher. This him is God. Because God is nirguna, without the gunas. When we can see that all the actions are being done just by these gunas, and there is something which is higher than the gunas, he attains to my being. So this is how we remove this bondage of karmas, bondage of the gunas also. Because otherwise, when we look at it, the previous verses, looks like a pretty miserable picture that even Satvikta binds us. Sure, Tamsikta and the Rajsikta, they bind us, but Satvikta binds us too, he says. Because you are looking for happiness in this world with a Satvik behavior. How do we reach our ultimate goal? That's what's being explained in this verse. It's almost like when we are traveling in, suppose in a train is moving. Even though we are standing in the train, we still feel the movement. But the minute we step out of the train, then you don't feel the movement of the train. So we got to stand outside of these gunas. Okay, because in the train you can sit also, you can sleep also, you can stand also, but you are still moving, you are feeling the vibration of the train. So the soul identifying itself and riding on the mind intellect equipment keeps on dancing. If the mind is in a sattvic mode, we think that soul is in a sattvic mode. So we got to see, become the seer. We got to see the difference between the Prakriti and the Purusha. We got to see that we are not colored by these gunas. Our real essence is never colored with the gunas. It's all pure. Pure in the sense that it's part of God. So that's why he says, when the seer beholds, and this art of beholding or disentangling ourselves from the gunas, from our thought process, is the art of meditation, guys. Okay. A meditator who is capable of doing so will behold and experience it subjectively. The state of the pure knowledge, uncontaminated by the dance of the thoughts. Okay, that is the art. And this is what Lord Krishna mentioned previously, if you remember, in the chapter number 6. Atam Sanyam Yoga. Very clearly he told us how to meditate, when to meditate, why to meditate. All that was given over there right in the beginning. So that is the only way. So that's why it's called seeing, beholding, seeing. It's not in the same sense as we see, I'm seeing this computer screen. It's not in the same sense. This is an object. When we use the word behold, it is a subject. Without that subject, we can't even look at the object. So it's a subjectively seeing. So behold, it's like a completely, there is no doubts left after that. Because object, when we see from a different angle, object can be seen differently. From the front, this screen looks different than the back. From the side, it looks different. But when we behold the self, it's altogether different. Because there's no back and front. There's no form. There's no color. So that beholding is, it's like so spectacular. Everything else becomes clear when you behold that. And no agent other than the guns. So when we experience and realize this self, then we see that all the actions are nothing other than done by our ego. Ego. Not the real I, not the seer, but the ego. You can call it a subtle body, but basically this is what's called ego. And knows him who is higher than the guns. So through this process, the mind will know that something is there higher, which is not colored by any of the gunas. It's neither white, nor red, nor black. So he who has understood that, he is not the reflection in his own mind, but that which is reflected therein. Okay, it's almost like if you have a bucket of water and we see the reflection of the sun, and we think that reflection is the sun. Because if the bucket of water is dirty or moving, we think that sun is moving. But somebody says, no, sun is up there. So this is what happens to this seer. So that's why he says he is the one who has escaped the shackles of all limitations and attained to my being. My being means, see, Lord Krishna is talking over here like a my means one with the Supreme. So a person has transcended his mind, intellect, has positivity or positively discovered himself, that who I am. Before that, the soul was entangled. There was no clarity, but now there is a clarity. I am different than that. This is the equipment given to me. This body is the vehicle through which I'm traveling, whether it's a physical body or a mental body. These are the bodies. Okay, but I am different. And now in the next verse, Lord Krishna is teaching us how can we attain this great goal? Because it sounds so beautiful, so calming. How can we attain it? Gunan etan atitye trin dehi dehasam udvan janam mrityu jara dukhe vimuktaha amritam ashnute. Gunan, the gunas, etan, these, atitye, having crossed, atitye, trin, three, dehi, the embodied, dehasam udvan, out of which the body is evolved. Janam mrityu jara dukhe. Janam is the birth, mrityu is the death, jara means decay, dukh is the pain. These are the different stages we go through in life. Vimuktaha, freed, amritam, immortality, ashnute, attains to. So the embodied one. And who's the embodied one? The soul, the Atma, embodied one, having crossed beyond these three guns, out of which the body is evolved, is freed from birth, death, decay, and pain, and attains to immortality. Amritam ashnate. And attains to immortality means knows that which part of me, the real me, is immortal. It never dies. So the Vedas, they prescribe a number of codes of conduct, social duties, rituals, regulations for us human beings. These prescribed duties and codes of conduct are called karma dharma or varna ashram dharma. In different stage in life, we have different duties. So there are duties towards this body. This is called a sharirik dharma. When we do our duties towards the body, it's just we get out of the tamsikta, the laziness, the carelessness. But pretty soon we realize that we don't want to stay in the rajsikta either, or even the satvikta. So to reach a sattva gun is not enough. It is also a form of bondage. Only when we transcend all these three, we know that we are no longer bound. No longer bound. Because otherwise, this change keeps on happening in the matter, in the prakriti. And this is what he talked about: birth, death, decay, and pain. There are 5 different stages. After the birth, there's definitely a growth. Then there's a decay. Then there's a disease. And there's a death. And they're all very painful. We know that birth itself is painful. All these, they are common and we are familiar with it. Sorrows are only the sorrows of the matter. Atma doesn't feel that sorrow actually. Sometimes we think we are feeling sorrow because we are identifying ourselves with this body. We identify with ourselves with this mind. Then there's a sorrow or there's a pain. Atma does not feel that. So now we see that Arjuna is listening so carefully. And he's asking a question. This is the style of our scriptures. The students are always encouraged to ask questions so that they can understand it. Let's look at Arjun's question, and next week we'll go through the answers also given by Lord Krishna, because the rest of the chapter is his answers. So Arjun's question, Ke linge trin gunan etan atitaha bhavati prabho kim achara katham cha etan trin gunan ati vartate. Ke means by what? Linge, that means symptom or the marks. Trin, three, gunan, gunas. Etan, these. Atitaha, crossed. Bhavati becomes Prabhu, O Lord. Kim acharaha, what is his conduct? Katham, how? Cha means and. Etan, these. Three. Gunan, gunas. Ati vartate, transcend or goes beyond. Because if these gunas are the one which are binding us, how does a person go beyond? Okay, or how do we recognize? So what are the symptoms of him who has crossed over the three guns? That means how will we recognize a person? Because so far Lord Krishna has mentioned the symptoms of these three guns, symptoms of sattvikta or rajasikta or tamsikta. So Arjuna says, what are the symptoms of him who has crossed over these guns? Oh Lord, he's calling Lord Krishna Prabhu, oh Lord. What is his conduct? Because he's still living in this body, in this society. What is the conduct? And how does he go beyond these three guns? So we can see that three definite questions Arjuna is asking. What are the symptoms? And we'll see that answer to this will be in the next verse, verse number 22, because this is verse number 21. So what are the marks by which a person who has gone beyond the influences of these three gunas can be recognized? How do we recognize? He'll tell us in number 22. And in next three verses, 23, 24, 25, the answer to the another question, that how does he deal with people? What is his conduct? Because majority of us are still persecuted by these gunas. How does he deal with us? And verse number 26, how such a person who is so perfect conquered his inner confusions and entanglements and attained spiritual glory? And that is answered in 26. Very clearly we'll see how beautifully Lord Krishna is answering these questions, Arjuna's questions. Another thing we see that how patient this Guru is. Throughout Bhagavad Gita, we see that Arjuna asks a question and Lord Krishna explains it so beautifully, in detail, until he understands. And sometimes he asking the same question again and still he answers it. Okay, so what are the marks of him who has crossed over the three guns? What is his conduct? And how does he go beyond? What happened? How did he reach there? Every student has the freedom to seek, to understand properly, logically also. Only then this philosophy is not just a theoretical philosophy. There's a practical aspect to it. It's not only Arjuna, this is for Arjuna, this is for all of us. So that's why I want to go through these answers next week, and we'll finish this chapter next week. So let's stop, and I'll have a few minutes to answer your questions also if anybody has before I leave. But let's do the Shanti part first. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnam Adaya पूर्णमेव विशेष्यते. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.